Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Writing Success Center workshop. My name is Giselle Miralles, and today's workshop is on formatting your literary essay. So if you are having trouble understanding how to format block quotes, or you're just unsure of general formatting for your paper, this is a workshop for you. If you're looking for more information on literary analysis, that's not something we're going to be covering in this workshop. So I would recommend this mostly for those of you who need help with specifically formatting of your paper. Okay, so before we begin, there are a few things you should do since this is an asynchronous workshop. This is a way to make the workshop a bit more engaging. The first thing you want to do is complete the accompanying activity worksheet. So wherever you found this workshop, there should be a worksheet available for download. If you're downloading this workshop or watching this workshop from the Writing Success Center's Canvas page, there are two formats, PDF and Word. Feel free to choose whichever you prefer to work in. And this worksheet will also count as proof if you're doing this for extra credit for a class or something like that. So please download that worksheet and complete it as you watch this workshop. The second thing is that this is a recorded workshop. So the great thing about that is you can take your time. So if there's ever a point where you need to rewind or pause, feel free to do so. With that, let's go ahead and get started. So the workshop goals for this workshop today, the first one is for you to reflect on what you find confusing about literary paper format. So you're going to have some time to write and think about what you're currently having trouble with so that you can identify what the information you need as you watch this workshop. The second thing is to help you understand MLA formatting for literature papers. And the last thing we're going to cover is a review of how to provide in-text citations, especially when it comes to block quotations and poetry. So for our opening reflection, just go ahead and answer these questions on your worksheet. The questions you're being asked are thinking about literary essays. What do you find difficult or confusing when it comes to formatting? For example, do you have trouble citing lines of poetry? Difficulty figuring out how to block quote? Do you generally have trouble with MLA format? So think about what you're currently having trouble with and what you'd like to learn more about during this workshop. The second question, or the last part, is what sorts of resources do you use to find information that will help you figure out how to format? So go ahead and reflect, take a few moments, pause here, and when you're ready, continue the workshop. All right, so if you're not done, just go ahead and continue pausing and continue once you're ready. So I want to review a few MLA formatting guidelines for literature papers. All research papers on literature do use MLA format because it is a universal citation method for the field of literary studies. If you already know MLA format, if it's something that you're comfortable with, a lot of this information might seem repetitive. So just keep that in mind, since, like I said, this is pretty much a review of MLA format, but I am going to cover literary paper specific formatting guidelines. So the first thing is, whenever you use a primary or secondary source, whether you are quoting or paraphrasing, you want to make parenthetical citations in MLA format. So that's the standard, parentheses, including the author's name and page number, with a period after the closed parentheses. Your works cited list will be the last page of your essay, per usual. All pages in your essay should have your last name. The page number is in the top right-hand all pages in your essay should have your last name and the page number in the top right-hand corner of your essay. So for example, Jones 12 or Jones 1. So that should just be at the top in your header. The second thing, or the fourth thing here, is writing should be in the literary present tense. So for example, if you're writing about Sandra Cisneros, you would write Sandra Cisneros states, not Sandra Cisneros stated. And that's because when you write about literature, you want to think of the work currently existing today. So even if it was written 100 years ago, the words still live on today. So writing is eternal. So whenever you're writing about literature, you're always writing in the present tense. Titles of poems, short stories, or works published in an anthology will have quotation marks around them. So for example, Ode to a Nightingale, that should be in quotation marks. Black Art, a poem, should also be in quotation marks. On the other hand, titles of books, plays, or works published singularly, so not anthologized, should be italicized unless it's a handwritten document, in which case underlining is acceptable. So the only time you should ever be underlining play titles, book titles, is when you're writing by hand. But if you're typing your essay, which all essays should be, you're going to italicize those titles instead. So longer works are italicized, shorter pieces like poems and short stories are in quotation marks. Lastly, you don't want to leave a quote or paraphrase by itself. You must introduce it, explain it, and then show how it relates to your thesis. So when you format quotations, there's quite a few rules depending on how long the quotation you're quoting is. So in-text citations that are less than 4 lines can be formatted can be formatted based on general in-text citation guidelines. For example, you would put the quote in quotations and then the parenthetical, in this case, Jones 13, period. So that's the standard way you quote everything that is less than 4 lines long. All quotes more than 4 lines should be block formatted. Quoting dialogue between characters in a play should also be in block quote format, and I will show you what that looks like in a bit. Block quotations should also not include quotation marks. So as I show above, you include quotation marks when things are shorter than 4 lines. But if you're block quoting, then quotation marks should not be included. You also want to introduce the block quote with a colon, unless the context of your quote requires different punctuation, and then start it on a new line. And again, I will show you examples of what that actually looks like. So for prose, prose is essentially if you're quoting from a novel, if you're quoting a block of text that is more than 4 lines, perhaps a paragraph, you do not need to indent the first line of the block quote more than the rest. So for example, you would provide, you would start with your analysis or like your introduction of the quote. In this case, this person says, "It is not until near the end of The Hound of Baskervilles that the hound itself is actually seen." So notice that that's a complete sentence. And after that sentence, they provide colons, right? And then they indent the rest of the quote, the entire quote, so not just the first line, but the entire quote, so that it is in a block format. So notice how the paragraph goes to the end and there's a period and then the parenthetical. So block quotations are also different in that the parenthetical is outside of the period. Generally, you're putting the period after the parenthetical, but in this case, because there's no quotation marks, you're putting the period after the quote and then providing the parenthetical information. So this is what it should look like if you are block quoting in your essay for prose specifically. For poetry, it's a little bit different. So poetry block quotations that are more than 3 lines should begin on a new line as well. Unless a quotation involves unusual spacing, format it as you would prose, right? So indent each line 1 inch from the margin and double space the lines. Again, block quotations should maintain the same double spacing that you're doing throughout your essay. Don't add any quotation marks that do not appear in the source. Again, no quotation marks for block quotes. So, for example, in this this sample right here, Gwendolyn Brooks' poem to John Oliver Killens in 1975 addresses another African American writer of the day. So again, they're introducing their quote, they're providing a colon, and then they're indenting the lines. So you can see here, there's 5 lines from the poem. And this one's a little different. You notice that instead of page numbers, they're adding line numbers. So that after the period in that parenthetical, that 1 through 5, those are line numbers. You only use line numbers in an MLA and text citation if the lines are numbered in the original source. So if you notice line numbers in that source, then you would use line numbers instead of page numbers. You also want to write lines in the first citation of the poem and the numbers in subsequent citations. So for example, for this one, if this is the first time I'm citing this in the essay, I would have had to write lines before the number 1, because I just want to indicate to the reader that I'm referencing lines and not page numbers. And then after that, you don't need to write lines anymore. But the first time you do it, you should be writing lines. If there are no numbers in the source, you can use page numbers instead. So if the poem appears on a website, don't include a number in the citation. For example, if you received a handout from your instructor, or they link you to a website, you don't need to include any numbers in that citation. You only use page numbers if there are no line numbers in the source. So that is how you would block quote for poetry. Plays, on the other hand, are fairly similar to poetry, but a little bit more complicated. So when quoting dialogue, include the character names in all capitals, followed by a period, and pay attention to indentation. So even though it might not look like that in the actual reading, maybe they're not using capitals followed by a period in the actual reading, that's still how you would format it in your actual essay. So when citing a play with numbered lines, the MLA parenthetical citation should include the author name and the act, the scene, and the line numbers. If the lines are not numbered, include the page number instead. So for example, in this one, we have in Shakespeare's Macbeth, Ross and Duncan exchange words, and then the colon. And then there's 2 lines here. So as you can see, there's Ross, all caps, period, and then the line. And then underneath it, you have Duncan, period, and then the line, right? And then again, period is not after the parenthetical. The period comes after the line. And the parenthetical has the author's name, in this case, Shakespeare, the act number, which is 1, the scene 2, and notice that there's periods in between these things, another period, and then 94 to 95. So I assume that's the line number, and then the closed parentheses. So this is how you would format block quotations for plays if that's what you're citing. Lastly, you want to practice this now. So now that you have some idea of how to format quotations, choose 2 quotes for an essay from an essay you're currently writing to format, right? So you can choose a short quote or a long quote, but just make sure you type it into the area on your worksheet where you see this exercise. So I'm going to give you a few moments, and once you're ready, continue with the workshop. Okay, so I just wanted to go over sources. So in the reflection, I had asked, what sorts of things do you do when you're looking for how to format your papers? Of course, always use Purdue OWL. You can find almost anything about MLA format on their website. I specifically got information for this workshop from their Writing About Literature formatting section. There's a link if you want to check it out. And I also got information from the Western Oregon University, their library there, and also another link if you'd like to read more into how to format block quotations. Thank you for watching today's workshop. As of fall 2022, we are back in person with in-person workshops. So if you would like to come see us in C345, please do. We're also offering workshops over Zoom. Thank you and have a nice day.